All right, this is a somewhat convoluted little story here, but I wanted to cover it because I just have to highlight Colin Liddell's just going hard into the neoliberal, pro NATO, Russia's evil, everything can be blamed on Russia kind of camp that he has since, I don't know, for the last couple of years. I this story gets a bit convoluted. I don't want to. I want to try to simplify it as much as I can. So he begins by saying some kind of low, uh, you know, lowbrow insult against Laura Loomer. I'm not taking Laura Loomer's side. I'm not defending Laura Loomer. I don't have any take on Laura Loomer here. I know she's a divisive figure, but let's put that aside for now. She tweeted this recently on X or Twitter. She was talking about what Colin calls a flamboyant demonstration of neo-Nazism that recently took place down in Florida involving a couple of groups called the Goyim Defense League and Blood Tribe. Okay. Now, Colin has been, has talked about Hollywood Nazis a lot. He's talked about how Nazis are, really conspicuous neo-Nazis are probably. In the past, he's talked about how they're probably feds. That was his line in the past, but that's not his line anymore, as you'll see. People who go around with swastika tattoos all over their faces and just these very demonstrative, in your face kinds of displays of neo-Nazism are. They're no. Colin used to think that they were feds. He used to. He used to think for sure that somebody like Andrew England, for example, was a fed, but he's doesn't think that anymore, as we'll see in a second here. Now, what I want to begin with is the tweet that Laura Loomer wrote the other day that Colin has a bone to pick with, but I have a bone to pick with Colin and his conclusions. So Laura Loomer wrote that Kent Boneface McClellan was arrested by the FBI in Florida for domestic terrorism in May of 2012. The FBI said he and others were preparing a terrorist act against national minorities in Florida. So he was arrested for preparing an act against national minorities in Florida, and then he fled to Ukraine to join Right Sector, a creation of the CIA, in 2014. So first of all, although Laura Loomer doesn't talk about this, how is it that somebody who was charged with plotting domestic terrorism, was allowed to leave the country and join and enter Ukraine and join this organization that she says was the Right Sector's creation of the CIA. I don't know if they're a creation of the CIA. They certainly are affiliated with the CIA and with NATO and other alphabet organizations of the Western Deep State. So he did that. He left and went to Ukraine in 2014, which is when the Maidan stuff was happening, when things were first popping off in Ukraine, and that's really when the hostilities began. They say the hostilities began in 2022 when Putin invaded, but really they began in 2014 when with the Maidan uprising, which was heavily funded and solicited by the CIA and NATO and so forth, the usual gang. So then she writes, in 2022, he, that is Boneface, the Kent Boneface McClellan, returned to Ukraine. So I guess he came back. So he was allowed to go, even though he was charged with domestic terror, plotting domestic terror, he was allowed to go to Ukraine, join Right Sector, and then come back to the United States, and then go back, and then return to Ukraine in 2022. After the invasion was underway, he returned to Ukraine and was reportedly deported. So they didn't want him there anymore. I don't know the details or the circumstances behind his deportation, but it's a little convoluted. So he goes back and forth to Ukraine, back to the United States, Ukraine, back to the United States, all the while he's facing charges for preparing a terrorist act against national minorities. And she writes, he's active in the local Nazi scene. Yesterday he was on I-4 with a group of Nazis who were saying they support Joe Biden while they were waving swastika flags and shouting slurs at me because I am Jewish. There is no way, she writes, you could get away with all that after being arrested by the FBI for domestic terrorism, and there's no way you could get away with traveling to Ukraine to fight in a foreign war as an American citizen, defected mercenary, unless you are some type of FBI and CIA informant. That seems pretty clear. That seems pretty obvious to me. Why would he have been allowed to leave the country, to come back into the country, and then to leave the country again in 2014 and then in 2022, respectively? So this is Boneface. Yep. So Colin ridicules what she has to say. Joe Biden feels that thanks to the efforts of wonderful right-wingers like herself, support for the war in Ukraine is lacking. So he has got in touch with friends in the CIA and asked them to kindly stage a display of swastika-waving neo-Nazism and Jew hatred, including nasty insults to Mrs. Loomer, in an effort to boost support among the general public for the war in Ukraine. I mean, I know the optics. Look, these optics are not great. I know that. I get that. On the other hand, this guy who is, it's not mischaracterizing him to call him a neo-Nazi. That's the ideology that he claims. That's who he is, and it's not it's not a mischaracterization of Right Sector or Azov Battalion in Ukraine to say that they're neo-Nazis. So anyway, you've got Ukraine allied with the United States. United States using Ukraine as a proxy war to harass Russia, and you've got characters like this that are being used clearly as assets by the United States. And it's like, well, why would the United States want to ally themselves with disreputable people, like this? Well, remember the United States associated itself with disreputable people like ISIS and Al-Qaeda when they were going for the proxy war in Syria a few years ago. Same deal. It was Islamic jihadists a few years ago. Now it's Ukrainian neo-Nazis. All right, and look, there you go. You see it right there. I mean, there's bigger than life. Okay, so who is possibly behind the Goyim Defense League and Blood Tribe? Again, this needs to be discussed. It needs to be pointed out that before Colin got this Russia obsession, he was pretty much set on labeling conspicuous neo-Nazis as feds for the United States. But now, what is he saying now? Who is possibly behind the antics of Goyim Defense League and Blood Tribe? The most obvious and effortless explanation would be Russia. Really. Obvious and effortless explanation would be Russia. Not only do we have the rather glaring attempt to refloat the tired meme that Ukrainians are Nazis here. The tired meme? That's what you're calling it? I mean, it was what all of the American media was saying. All of the mainstream media in America were saying, look at Azov Battalion, look at Right Sector, this Vice magazine, we're talking about all these Nazis in the Ukraine before 2022, and then suddenly, nope, gotta tamp that down. I mean, even, I have a video that I recorded a few months ago, which featured Jon Stewart, with the allied with the Pentagon at some event where he was honoring a Ukrainian soldier, and this soldier had tattoos that he was from Azov Battalion. He had tattoos that signify that he was, his ideological orientation was National Socialist, but. And so you had this Leibowitz, John Leibowitz, Nee Stewart, this Jewish comedian / entertainer, slapping high fives or giving a handshake to this Ukrainian Nazi soldier. I had that video that I recorded a few months back. So I don't think it's a tired meme. But I mean, that's very like Colin Liddell to say that at this point, because he's made the switcheroo. It's like now the most obvious and effortless explanation would be Russia. I mean, look, without offering any kind of defense of Russia, or again, I have to make it clear, I'm not pro-Russia in the sense that I think Russia is beyond reproach, or that they would never do bad things, or they would never do sneaky things, or they'd never do evil things. But how does Russia manage to get this guy who's a neo-Nazi, who's openly neo-Nazi, who's charged with domestic terrorism by the FBI, how does Russia get him to leave the country and go to Ukraine and then go back to the United States? How is Russia able to do that? He's not entering and leaving Russia. He's not being allowed to leave and then come back to Russia after being charged in Russia with plotting domestic terror. He's being allowed to leave and come back to America after being charged with plotting domestic terror. So how is this, how is the most obvious and effortless explanation Russia? Where is the evidence for that? It doesn't make any sense. And this, again, without taking any stand on the integrity of Laura Loomer, I just think this whole notion that Russia is behind Bonehead or Boneface or whatever he is it's ludicrous on the face of it. And again, Colin Liddell has done this. It's something to be noted that he's made this about face where anyone, pretty well, I said anyone who was neo-Nazi, but pretty much anyone who was on the dissident right, or a lot of people who are on the dissident right, are, he went from saying they're just feds, and then he went from that to saying, oh no, he's saying they're Russian assets. I mean, without any kind of explanation, like, for this transition, except that he's just decided to be, Russia, Russia, Russia kind of guy, to echo the neoliberal line on Russia and Putin, and to be in support of the war in Ukraine, the proxy war for the West. Colin, you got to do better, man. That's all. I'm done. Thanks for watching.